Hi and welcome to another paint tutorial by Promethean Paints. Today we're going to be painting Space Marine Terminator. This came from the sort of character packs that came on made to order a few months back. But obviously you can use this against any Terminator or sort of any Blood Angel figure really. I'm using it on Terminators because they've got a lot of armour areas, really show the red up very well, but yeah, you can use this against any red Blood Angel. So I've undercoated the model with black, and then I'm using Vallejo White Ink through the airbrush and creating our sort of gradient effects that we do so much. So this is Vallejo White Ink straight from the airbrush, no thinning down here. You can add one or two drops of thinner to this, but be careful if you add any thinner, as it can make the ink very wet and cause a lot of running and spider webbing. And basically what we're doing here is adding pure white to the areas we want to be the most red, letting it naturally sort of halo gradient itself out to the black where it will be your darkest. We're going to be using red ink to give us our Blood Angel's red colour, and the red ink is really strong and it even turns the black into a dark red colour, so you can leave areas in almost pure black and you'll still get a natural dark red effect when we go over it with the red ink. So yeah, just go around the model, the areas you want to be the brightest, usually at the top, but you can add some reflective bits like on the bottom of the leg. Get pure white onto those, and then the darkest areas just leave jet black. You also saw that I've painted the banner as well, using the rules that we've got there. The brightest areas to be red, darkest areas to be dark. And here you can see I'm just adding some extra white onto those areas that I really want to be the brightest red. So there we are, using Vallejo Red Ink. You can use any red inks. Also to add 1 drop of Doomfire Magenta, so it's about 3 drops of red ink to 1 drop of Doomfire Magenta. It just gives a slightly brighter red. You don't have to add that Doomfire Magenta, but it just feels it adds a little bit more flavour to the actual ink itself. Helps thicken it up a little bit as well, because the inks can be quite wet, but we don't have to. You can just go pure red ink. And then what we do is we just apply the red ink across all of the model, all of the areas that you've painted. Again, this can be used for Termies, it can be used for your Primaris, to your old school Marines. This same method can be used on your vehicles. There might be some other methods with the vehicles about adding some colour contrast to the shadows, but it's exactly the same principle. So your white base over, and then the red is your over colour. And just work yourself around. Don't hold the nozzle too long. Don't hold it over the same area for too long. You'll get a lot of pooling and you'll just ruin it. If you do make a mistake, just let it dry and start again. Go over it with black and then back over it with white. I found myself, I bought a couple of cheap models from eBay. I got a cheap Rhino, a cheap couple of Primaris Intercessors for about £20 I think, all in, for a bunch of cheap models, and I use them as my practice models. You can even buy old bits of scenery, practice on that, old bits of wood, just to practice this. It's not too difficult, quite straightforward with the airbrush. Yeah, so just work yourself around the model, covering all of that white and black area, basically all the armour cover, and you'll notice that the red does cover the black really well. It gives a natural gradient from light red to dark red. Okay, with that done, grab an old but still decent-ish brush, and now we're just going to colour in all the areas. So any area that's not the armour, that you didn't want red, just paint back in as black. This is optional, but I find it really helps. Not only does it help you find out where all the little bits and pieces are on the model, it'll just to help define some shapes, give a natural shadow when you're painting over them. It just fills back in those areas. You could of course be extra careful during your airbrushing or cover these areas with putty, but I find the time it takes to do that, you could just use this method. So yeah, just thin that black down a little bit and then just work yourself around the model, painting in any non-armour areas with the black, taking care not to touch the red. If you do, we can fix that up later. We can make it as battle damage, but yeah, try and take your time and take it easy. You'll notice as well on his bolter, I've got a couple of extra bits on there. They're from Deadly Print Studios. They're muzzle flares. I think they're small size, maybe medium size. There's 2 of them, as is the combi bolter or storm bolter. So yeah, you can get those from Deadly Print Studios. You can either buy the STL files from them, or you can buy the physical. I buy the physicals because I don't have I used to have a 3D printer, but I got rid of it a while back. So you can buy and print those as you want, or just buy. They're based in Spain, but the stuff gets within a week to 10 days. It's very quick delivery. I'll thoroughly recommend using them for any of your bits. They're really good, really detailed. I'll go over how to paint those as one of the final steps. But yeah, just for now, go over the model with any matte black. I use Army Painter's matte black, but a Baden black or the Duncan Rhodes black is just as good. And we're going to fast forward in time. Going to paint the face. We're going to start off sort of a pale face. We're going for, obviously he's a blood angel, so you know, our vampires. So I wanted to be a bit paler. So I start off with base coat of Cadian Fleshtone. So just paint this all over his head. Takes a couple of coats. It's quite a thin colour because it's actually a layer paint. It's not a base paint, but it's relatively thick. But yeah, thin it down a little bit, and then yeah, Cadian Fleshtone all over his face. And then once that's dry, just make a wash of AK Wine Red, or you can use the GW Contrast, which is Vulpus Pink. Of course, water that down heavily. Water both of these down heavily, so it's almost one little drop of paint to 5-6 drops of water, and then just apply this all over the face as your face wash. I do this. I don't use Reichland Flesh Shade or any flesh wash. Just find this adds a bit more depth, a bit more realism, for want of a better word, to your faces. Reichland Flesh Shade is, you can always add a little bit of pink to that, but I find just adding a wash of this, a reddish, purplish colour, just adds a bit more realism to the face, a bit more definition. Depending on how you water it down, I've watered it quite heavily. I actually apply 2 coats once it's dry. If it's not that heavily watered, then only 1 coat will do, but it's all on taste preferences here. Just like any wash, you want it to get into all those nooks and crannies. Yeah, once it's dry, we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, And the next stage we're going to be using Kislev Flesh, and for this we'll be highlighting some of the raised areas, so his nose, his eyebrows, the lines on his forehead, the tops of the cheekbones, the chins, tops of the ears, anywhere that stands out and will not only catch the light, but sometimes with skin you'll find even in shadow the skin is bright. So wherever there's raised areas, or you would find on a face there'd be natural highlights, just give those a little cover of this Kislev Flesh. It's only watered down ever so slightly, it's quite a thin paint, but just take extra care. I'm using a Rosemary & Co. 00 on these. Sorry, not Rosemary & Co. These are Raphael's. 2 the 2s, but the artificial range. Any thin brush, just take your time. If you make a mistake, just go back over it, do the wash again, and give it another go. And here we move with the final highlight, which is with the Pallid witch flesh, and this we just do on the very raised areas, the tip of his nose, tip of the eyebrows, just on the points that would be the brightest. And then I just want to apply a bit more definition to those shadows, so around the eyes and around the mouth I add very, very thin glazes of the wine red, just to deepen those shadow areas. There was a little bit of lost definition, but I've just added some more of this just to bring out that definition. You may not need to do this if you've maybe added a third coat. Okay, so next we're going to be painting the Crux Terminatus and some other iconography across the model. So we start off with a mid-grey. I use the AK Graphite. There's lots of greys in the GW range, but this is just a standard mid-grey colour. Administratum grey, I think, probably in the GW range. And with this, because we've painted the black underneath, I'm almost dry brushing this on, slightly heavier paint, so it's not as light as a dry brush, but close to it, so you're just almost catching the top of all of the detail with the paint, so that you leave some of that black in the shadows. But the idea is to cover, probably 95% we're covering with the graphite, as the base colour. And then once we've done that, we'll be moving on to the AK Blue Grey, which is the Ulthen Grey, I think it is, from Games Workshop. Be just as good here, but it's just a light grey. First of all, I'll make a little 50-50 mix just to create a sort of mid colour between the brightest grey, and we just do the same here. So I'll be painting the tops of the skulls, the tops of the bone, the bits that I want to catch the light. That's what I'll be painting with this before we move on to our final highlight, which is the pure blue grey on top. And once we've done that, we're moving on to the metallics. So I'll be using the AK gunmetal, but the GW iron breaker or lead boucher would be just as good on this. I use gunmetal. It's got a slight bluish hint to it, not too much, it's very subtle, but certainly when it catches the light there's some blue. And I just base coat any of the metal work in this colour, in your metallic colour, where you can just leave some of that black in the recesses, again sort of almost like a wet dry brush over those areas. So there's some tubes, there's some parts on the gun, the barrels of the gun, and the pole of the banner. There's not too much metal work on these miniatures. Now for the gold, I'm going to start from a very dark colour and work our way up. So the first colour we're going to use is AK Burnt Tin, and this gives a really good base coat across all of the gold. So just whatever you want to be gold, base coat with the AK Burnt Tin. You can leave a little bit in the recesses, but it doesn't hurt if you fill them all in. This is a very dark colour, but it gives a good base for our rusty gold and old gold, which will come next. there you can see I just did some highlights of the silver whilst I was waiting for that burnt tin to dry. So now we're going to be moving on to our first highlight of the gold. So for the gold, we'll be going straight over to AK Old Gold, and what I'll be doing here is almost edge highlighting and then filling in about 30-40% of what was covered by the rusty gold, and this will just help define all of the edges. This is our standard gold recipe, so you start off with burnt gold, then you do your first highlight with rusty gold, and then your second highlight with the old gold, and then you can use your brightest silver as your top highlight, like we do generally. And that really helps push the gold effect, especially on that banner. Yeah, standard approach, nice and easy. So for the top highlight, I make a mix of the old gold and Stormholt Silver, so you get quite a bleached out gold. And for this I just apply it on those top areas where I want it to be the brightest. Not too much. You need to have dark areas as well as the light areas. Without dark there can be no light, without light there can be no dark. So not too much. And then once you've applied this, you can apply just a slight edge highlight with the pure Stormholt Silver. This just helps define some edges and some shapes. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the scrolls and the wax. And so for this, it's a base coat of AK Magenta with a highlight of AK Intense Pink on these. So just find all your little parchments and your scrolls, and then just base coat the waxes with the magenta, which would be, I guess, Screamer Pink maybe in the GW range. And then once it's dry, just do a very simple highlight with the AK Intense Pink. Usually a little dot in the middle, a little shape that's in the middle, and then the Intense Pink just over the top. As there's only one on this model, whilst it's drying, I will be painting the parchment itself. So we just do base coat the parchment, and then we'll apply a wash and then a highlight. So once that vampiric flesh is dry, so that was a base coat of light earth and then vampiric flesh, we're now going to move on to painting what would be the sort of leather areas on other models, but there's no leather on these, so I'm using this to paint the sort of banner. We're moving on to AK leather brown, and then it will be highlighted with AK saddle brown. This is our standard leather mix. We're not starting from a darker brown colour. I wanted this to stand out slightly. So yes, it's AK leather brown, which is a sort of Mornfane brown colour, and then an AK saddle brown as your highlight. You can leave some of the black in the deepest recesses. If you're unable to, then you can just go over the model with some over the banner with some Nuln Oil just to pick that out. Yeah, we move on to the saddle brown, and all we're going to be doing is almost edge highlighting and putting on some scratches and some marks to show the sort of leather's a bit tatty. With a bit of Cadian Fleshtone, we just add just the final highlight. This would be your most scratch marks, not too many, so we'll be just doing a little bit of freehanders or some words over the top. But this just helps define the shapes and add some wear and tear to that leather. That final highlight was just a sort of an ivory colour. Like it's a bit optional. Just really wanted the tops of those banners to pop. But yeah, it's optional, that part. Next thing we're going to do is move on to just highlighting any black. So your gun cases, Sometimes your leather can be in these colours, but yeah, this is just the black. So we start with AK Anthracite as the first edge highlight, and then the second edge highlight on the brightest points will be the AK grey blue, or you can use the blue grey if you wish, but any dark grey, light grey combo will do. Some of these ones I use have a bluish hint. I find it adds a little bit more flavour to your black edge highlighting if it's not just greys, but it's like darker blue greys for these. You can dry brush this if you want, but there was only this part of it, so I just went over it normal edge highlighting. Okay, and now we're moving on to the fun part, edge highlighting the armour and adding battle damage. For this I'm using AK Dead Red. It's a very pale, bright red that works perfectly as an edge highlight for what we've done. And now what we're doing is our good old method of edge highlighting the entire model, but as we're edge highlighting it, we're adding battle damage. So we can add thicker lines where we want to have damage, scratches, patches of pure dead red that look like bullet holes. So this is step one, where we add the redness of the sort of effect we're going for. So where anything has caught an edge, that's what we're painting as this red. The second stage is to fill those gaps in with pure black. So this is all personal preference. I add, on this model, I add quite a bit of battle damage. I imagine he's been through the wars quite a bit as our little standard bearer. But you can add as little or as much as you want. Obviously you don't have to do it at all, you can just edge highlight in the dead red and leave it as that. But I find this helps me. I have a slightly shaky right hand, and I can't always get a pure edge, so I make up for that by creating battle damage. This also helps if you've made any mistakes. You've got a little bit of black on the armour, just go around it with your dead red and you've got natural battle damage. You can also, just prior to this step, which I've forgotten to do here but I add it in a little bit later, is just prior to this add any transfers to the model. I find it's pretty safe to do a coverage of a varnish, a matte varnish. You can use AK matte or AK ultra matte varnishes just to protect the armour and to protect any solvents when you use the transfers. You don't want any of that paint to wash off. But yeah, I forgot to do it here, but yeah, add the transfers here because you can do your battle damage then over the top of your transfers. On the back of the banner it's a little bit different. You'll notice later on I do some minor highlights with some sort of hashing, where you go almost making noughts and crosses boards, so down at an angle, sort of left to right or up and down or diagonally, and then diagonal lines opposite to those, just to create a little bit of texture on the banner, as there's quite a big space on the back to fill in, but I'll cover that a little bit later on. Okay, and once that's battle damage is done, as you can see I've added some transfers onto his arm and then gone over it. You can see the hashing on the back there of the banner. I've also added some transfers to the black on the bottom of the banner. So now we need to fill it all in. So where you've made your dents, your bullet holes, your scratch marks, you just fill those areas in now with matte black, leaving some of that red obviously as the edge highlight to it, but just this is where you add in the depth to the damage, so you can just work yourself around the model. I find if it's your first time doing it, just work in sections, so do a leg, then the other leg, then an arm, then an arm. I'm pretty used to this now, so I do the whole model, but sometimes on bigger models I'll do it in sections, whatever works easiest, but always just keep going over the model just to make sure you've covered it all. Okay, and there we go. Doesn't take too long. Probably in real time, maybe 20 minutes to do all of that. And at this point, you've almost got yourself a finished model, but we're going to add some special touches. So first of all, some of the red glowing effects. So we're going to use AK Wine Red, and this will be on the vents, and then we've got some blood red. So I use this on any vents, any red lights that he's got, but for this model we're going to do some green lighting. So just for this, it's just the vents on the back of his armour. So just give everything a base coat of the wine red first. Whilst that's drying, we're going to move on to the green effect, green lighting effect, which is on his eye. Not on his eye, sorry, on his that little box thing that's above. So we're going to be using AK black green and AK deep green. And so the black green is the base coat on the green lights. So you just paint that entire area as black green, and then once that's dry, the actual lens itself paint deep green. So the entire area with the black green, and then just highlight the lens itself with the deep green. And once that black green is drying, so I'm jumping around all over the place, this is real time that you're seeing this, you'll notice that I've painted the flare, the muzzle flare on the gun. It's all been painted as pure white. And then we're going to be using the GSW fluorescent orange yellow. Give it a good shake as I throw it all around the place, and paint the entire muzzle flare. You have to be careful here, just paint the whole flare that orange yellow fluorescent colour. So don't paint it the pure fluorescent yellow or fluorescent orange. This is GSW's fluorescent orange yellow. That gives you a good base for the muzzle effect that we're going to go for. And you can see, whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm now painting the lenses in the deep green. So just the lenses, it's deep green. And you'll see that you almost get a natural glowing effect just from the black green to the deep green. I then just, where that light, that lens light, would catch any areas, I'm just highlighting those in the deep green for now. Okay, whilst that's drying, we're now going to highlight the vents. So we start in the centre of the vent, so in that centre third, just add the AK Blood Red, which would be GW Evil Sun Scarlet, which is a fantastic colour. So just the areas that you want to be glowing, just initially add this Blood Red into those areas. Once you've done that, and that's drying, we will be moving back to the green glowing effect. You notice I've got a little bit of white on the wet palette, so the very centre of the lens, just add a little dab of white in the very centre of the lens, and then just a little bit on the edge highlight that we just did earlier, not too much. This will be the beginning of the glowing effect, because we're going to get some AK fluorescent green, and we'll be painting that over the areas we've just painted green. So generally this will cover all of the white and a little bit extra, because these areas are so small. You're pretty much covering all of the deep green and the white in this, and this is the final effect to really make those green lenses pop. A little bit later on we'll add some OSL to the top of his head, just to look like that green light is shining down on his little bald head. So yeah, as you can see there, a few steps: black green, deep green, white and fluorescent green. You get a lovely glowing effect. Now with the deep green, make a sort of a mix, and then thin it down ever so slightly, sorry, with the black green. So a thinnish wash. It's not quite a glaze, but nearly a glaze. I add some green to the top part of his head where I would want the sort of reflection of the green light to be. Not too much. And as we're glazing, always finish the brush, well, the point you want the most paint to be left. So wherever you pull the brush away, that's where the green will be left at its thickest and brightest. To add a little bit of definition, there's a AK green skin. AK green skin punch, amazing name paint. It's really, really bizarre green. I add a little bit of that to the base of the black green, and then a little bit of deep green, and then over the deep green a little bit of the fluorescent. So we're sort of using the same principles to create the light as to get the reflection, and then I make a very thin wash again of the black green and just glaze it from the outside in, just to get a bit more blending in. It's optional, takes a bit of practice, but you make washes of glazes of the black green to create the base of the reflection, and then a little bit of deep green, and then a little bit of fluorescent green on the sort of topmost point where it would be the closest to the light. This is an optional part here, but with a bit of practice it adds a little bit more fanciness to our model, and just a bit of OSL to the head. Right, to finish off on the vents, we get some of our Green Stuff World Fluorescent Red, give it a really good shake, and then we add the Fluorescent Red to the back of the vents. This generally covers the blood red that we've just done. Doesn't matter if you go over the wine red a little bit. Sometimes we do a white highlight here and then paint this over the top, but for these Terminators I wanted a sort of darker glowing effect, and so just painting this directly into the vents itself helps sell that. And then with that fluorescent red, just paint it all over the muzzle flash, but as you're painting it, move from the tip of the muzzle flash to the base of the muzzle flash, so that most of the colour gets left at the base where it's closer to the flash. Just helps sell the muzzle effect. Doesn't pull. Try and make it so that it doesn't pull. It's almost an even coat over the whole flash, just to get the coverage. So yeah, it's the base coat of the orange, yellow, and then go over it with the fluorescent red. Okay, whilst that's drying, we're just going to add some OSL to the gun itself. So just using the AK Blood Red, I just do some thick edge highlighting around the areas closer to that muzzle flash, just to show where the sort of gun, the flare would be glowing on the weapon itself. So you just base that in the AK Blood Red, not too much, and make sure you only cover those areas there that would be getting that glowing effect. Don't cover anything that would be in natural shadow. It sort of breaks the effect we're trying to get. So there's some on the sort of gun itself, some on the flare, on the casing. Then edge highlight where you've just done the red. Not not too much, not over all of it, just over the areas that you want to be brightest. And then once that white is dry, using our fluorescent red, just go over those areas, almost edge highlighting it again with the fluorescent red into the whites, just to really make it look like the actual gun casing is reflecting the muzzle flare itself. And then we're getting some AK Fluorescent Orange. And we're just going to finish selling these glowing effects now. So the Fluorescent Orange we put in the very centre of the vents. So this is your brightest point. Tiny little dots in the very centre of the vents themselves, just to help sell the glowing effect. And then again we're doing tiny little bits of this where the glow would be at its brightest on the reflections we've got. I keep trying to get the wrong paint there, but this is just using the orange colour, very tips of where it would have caught, not too much. And then a bit of orange in the barrel hole on the side, the sort of vents on the side. And yeah, there we have our Terminator with some really great battle damage glowing effects, both red and green. So we've obviously got a banner. We need to stick a name in that banner. So I looked up, and so there's oh yeah, first of all I had some little lines for the scroll work. Just on this, nothing clever on these ones. These scrolls are quite thin, so I just had some little squiggly lines using the pure black, and then I freehand red tier on the actual model itself a little bit later on. So there he is. We've got an optional stage just coming up, just for the bolter. You don't have to do this. So I'm using AK Wargame Enamel liquid pigments. This is the fluorescent orange. You can get the most of the fluorescence. It's an enamel paint, so I use a very old brush on this. And all I'm going to do is just add 2 drops of this into those barrel vent holes at the sides. Literally two dots of it. It's because it's really bright. And this just makes your vent holes look even brighter, so they're your hottest point. And so yeah, there he is, all finished up. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Like and subscribe for some more. Be painting, this is the first, be moving on doing ultramarines, Iron Warriors, all the main factions will be covered in a series of other painting tutorials.